Emotions are no question the most complicated part of the human race. Trying to completely understand them is like trying to know exactly how many stars are in the Milky Way. You could spend an entire lifetime trying to uncover their entire layers, and when you think you've done it, there is always another undiscovered layer taunting you with its incomprehensible properties. But regardless, our efforts to keep them from entirely influencing our decisions and actions will always be appreciated not only by ourselves, but also from the people around us. Now, before we begin, I'd like to point out that this is not a universally acclaimed method. This mental conditioning is basically what I've learned and utilized personally to manage my impulsively irresponsible anger that I've suffered from for more than a decade. A method that, according to me at least, could effectively become a substitute or a supplement alongside your meditation work. This method is not to extinguish your emotions or to completely remove them from existence, because you can't ever do that, as emotions cannot be destroyed. It's only to momentarily neutralize them and keep them at bay until you've found a way to properly and constructively express them or compensate for them. Because as much as you like to wish that you could suppress your emotions as much as possible and as long as possible to the point where they will go away forever, they will eventually resurface sooner or later, whether you like it or not. The first and foremost thing that you must do is to find your trigger points, or what incentivizes those emotional reactions. And as simple as it sounds, it's actually very hard to do initially if you've never done a thorough objective introspection regarding yourselves before, especially those trigger points that can make you consider hurting someone, because it literally involves you calling yourselves out for your own ignorance and weaknesses that you often don't want, don't care, and too sensitive to admit and comprehensively work on. You must fully understand that negative emotions are the defensive or coping reactions that are generated by both internal and external provocations and conflicts surrounding your unadmitted insecurities, uncontrollable irritations, and unrealized expectations. But also, oftentimes, it can be just your own hormonal imbalance affecting your mood. Now, your trigger points can be identified in the ranges or scope of those three categories. What are they is down to your own responsibility to introspect and identify. To make your introspection process easier, and I've always said this many times, is to make them more plausible and tangible to your five senses, i.e. write them down so that you can perceive them a lot clearer and more definitively than just relying on your mental notes. If you can find your trigger points and fully acknowledge them, i.e. you are able to know the visceral conditions of why they are able to generate negative emotions from you, then half of your problems are already solved. Because again, the main problem with identifying your trigger points is simply your fear of a diminished sense of self-worth afterwards. Because it literally involves and revolves around you pointing out your own shortcomings and vulnerabilities. And if you kept rejecting or ignoring or avoiding those trigger points, you are basically running away from the problems you're trying to solve. Your rejection or ignorance towards your weaknesses and deficiencies are what's causing the constant outburst of retaliation, because you are trying to avoidantly contradict your self-evidential reality. On the contrary, your acceptance and acknowledgement of your trigger points will generate the subconscious and intuitive understanding or sense of control and anticipation that you need to realize about yourselves, to reduce or neutralize the internal conflict between your ego and conscience when you get provoked. Of course, this is a lot easier to do when it only involves minor provocations or circumstances that you can easily tolerate without much mental effort or exertion, like getting your windscreen shat on by birds or someone pulling a small prank on you, for example, as you can simply acknowledge and dismiss them because they barely scratch your ego. But when it comes to major provocations, i.e. those that makes you tick and become fully aware, those that really gets underneath your skin and deep into your nerves, or those that triggers you a lot and puts a huge dent on your ego, like someone blatantly insulting your physical limitations and status, or losing a crucially substantial amount of money, for example, then you need more than just acknowledging those trigger points to effectively neutralize those fast and momentous buildups of negative emotions. This is where the other half of our problem lies. In this case, you also need to quickly or swiftly counter those momentous negative emotions with convictive, future conception or narration and or eventual execution of positive circumstances, ideally as soon as possible, in order to generate a wave of positive emotions so that they can help neutralize your wave of negative emotions. Acknowledge and counter. For irritations and most unrealized expectations, it can be literally anything from eating your favorite dish to treating yourself with something personally gratifying. Like for example, personally, if I get massively irritated to the point where I want to punch someone, I simply shift my thoughts into getting my favorite ice cream afterwards to redirect my focus away from the provoking negative circumstances towards the rewarding positive circumstances. Now, when it comes to your insecurities being significantly provoked, which is possibly the hardest thing for all of us to emotionally handle, it's quite a bit more specific. You must redirect your thoughts towards positive circumstances that not only generate positive emotions but also can help compensate the dent or cut in your ego. Like for example, if someone blatantly insults your height, which you are very insecure about, you need to neutralize those negative emotions that have been generated through that provocation by shifting your thoughts into positive compensatory circumstances that you are going to manifest ideally later in the day or afterwards. Like lifting weights and getting a PR or a PB, or working extra hours through the night on your own personal project. Whether you want to respond or not to the individual who provoked you is entirely up to you, but the most important thing is to calm yourself down before saying any word or expressing anything. Essentially, it's relatively similar like trying to calm a baby down from crying by making funny faces, singing him or her a song, or giving him or her nice treats. Now maybe some of you would say, wait a minute, isn't that relatively similar to toxic positivity? No, it isn't, because toxic positivity is when you firstly, deludedly and ignorantly refuse to acknowledge your weaknesses to eventually work on them and compensate for them. And secondly, toxic positivity is all about positive thinking and not positive performing. Notice the difference? Now, would this method have a thoroughly immediate effect on you? No, it wouldn't, because just like muscles, you need to mentally condition your mind consistently through time to experience the full workings of this method. Or any method, to be honest, because again, this is not the sole and absolute method for emotional control. In order to eventually achieve emotional strength, you have to practice or train emotional control long enough to the point where it becomes a predisposed instinctual response for your mind to simply flow through. A lot of people still think that controlling your emotions or being emotionally strong means that you are entirely neglecting your emotions. That is absolutely not the case. You have to understand them first and foremost before you build an attitude around them so that you can have total authority over your natural impulses. And one of the main important essences of masculinity itself is being able to control your emotions, no matter the circumstances, so that you can remain consistently objective. And that, I'm very much sure, is what you gentlemen want to eventually achieve. Thank you for watching.